6 years after the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, entered into force, the Trump administration is seeking to reshape the pact around tariffs, stricter automotive content rules, and supply chain security. As negotiations with Mexico begin and Canada faces growing pressure, the future of North American trade is entering a period of significant uncertainty. Welcome to another episode of Reg Talks. Join us as we explore USMCA renegotiations amid rising trade tensions.
That's a huge shift, especially since most people thought the USMCA, or NAFTA, before it, meant stable, tariff-free trade. I'm glad we're diving into this. I'm here to make sense of what's changing, why it matters, and what North American trade could look like next.
So, in today's episode, you'll learn why the US is abandoning tariff-free trade, how new rules could reshape where cars and steel are made, and what all this means for Mexico and Canada. We'll dig into the politics, the numbers, and where this leaves everyday businesses and workers.
Let's lay out the roadmap. First, the US's new interventionist strategy. Then, why trade deficits are at center stage. Next, the heated debate over auto rules. After that, what these changes mean for steel and for Canada's role. And finally, what's at stake for the future of North American trade.
So, let's start with the big picture. Why is the US suddenly moving away from the tariff-free model that's defined North American trade for decades?
It really comes down to the current administration embracing a more hands-on, interventionist approach. Instead of just letting goods flow freely, they want to use tariffs as leverage to nudge investments, influence where products are made, and push partners to prioritize U.S. economic goals.
That's a big philosophical shift. It's like moving from let the market decide to the government shapes who benefits. But it's not just abstract. The U.S. has kept tariffs on Mexico and Canada in place as it starts renegotiating USMCA.
Yeah, and the clear message is, future tariff relief isn't automatic. It's now something trading partners have to earn by aligning with U.S. priorities, whether that's using more U.S.-made parts or adopting certain industrial policies.
All that leads to the question of trade deficits. The U.S. administration seems fixated on its growing trade gap with Mexico even as its global goods deficit actually shrank. Why is this such a sticking point?
For them, the numbers are a red flag. Last year, the U.S.-Mexico deficit jumped about 15%, hitting nearly $197 billion, while the overall deficit fell. They see this as proof the current deal isn't working, or at least not working for U.S. interests.
So deficit reduction is the new guiding star. The U.S. is doubling down on auto and steel tariffs, and there's talk of tying tariff reductions to Mexico raising its own tariffs against imports from outside North America, especially from countries like China.
That's right. There's a real focus now on third country inputs, those foreign-made parts that sneak into supply chains. The administration wants tighter rules to keep the benefits of trade inside North America.
Automotive rules of origin are getting a lot of attention. So what's actually changing in the way cars qualify for tariff-free treatment under USMCA?
Currently, a car needs about 75% of its value to come from North America, plus those labor rules that reward higher wages, mostly in the US and Canada. Now, the US wants an extra layer, a minimum amount of US-specific content in vehicles built in Mexico.
That's a big deal for automakers. They'll have to rethink sourcing, and maybe even where they build. Plus, the US wants to count more electronic components as core parts, and a lot of those are still imported from Asia.
Exactly. By tightening definitions and stacking on US-only requirements, Washington hopes to pull supply chains closer to home, but it's unclear if these new demands will replace the old rules or just pile on top.
Cars aren't the only flashpoint. Steel is just as contentious, and the US isn't shy about using tariffs here either. What's the story?
Steel tariffs are now 50%, and the U.S. wants any steel getting tariff breaks to be melted and poured in North America. Plus, they're pushing Mexico to match U.S. tariffs on steel from outside the region to block foreign steel sneaking in.
Meanwhile, Canada's kind of stuck on the sidelines. The US is negotiating with Mexico first, and there's tension over Canada's own retaliatory tariffs and industrial policies, especially in autos.
That's put a real strain on the three-country unity that defined NAFTA. Canadian unions are already calling the U.S. approach one-sided. But with so much trade on the line, Canada may feel pressure to accept whatever deal the U.S. and Mexico eventually strike.
Canada isn't just waiting around, though. They're reinforcing their own trade defenses, especially for steel and aluminum. What's happening on that front?
Canada's extending its steel and aluminum tariffs for another year, but keeping U.S. and Mexican products exempt. They're using quotas. If imports go over historical averages, the rest faces a hefty 50% tariff. The goal is to protect local producers from cheap foreign competition and global oversupply.
It's a chess game, each country building defenses, while still needing access to each other's markets. The next few months of talks could really decide whether North American trade stays open or shifts permanently toward more protectionism.
And with about $1.6 trillion in annual trade at stake, these negotiations aren't just about government strategies. They're about jobs, industries, and prices across the continent.
Let's wrap up. First, the U.S. is moving away from automatic tariff-free trade, using tariffs as leverage to get partners to align with its economic strategies.
Second, trade deficits, especially with Mexico, now drive U.S. policy, with the administration pushing for stricter rules on autos and steel to support American manufacturing.
Third, Canada is caught between reinforcing its own trade defenses and responding to shifts in U.S.-Mexico talks, all while North American unity is being tested.
If you're following this story, the next step is to watch the upcoming negotiation rounds, especially those on auto rules and supply chain content. That's where the shape of North American trade will really be decided.